Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tara Pearson, the Executive Director of your Greater Seminole Area Chamber of Commerce. I would like to welcome each of you and thank you for your interest in today's program. As many of you know, the Chamber is dedicated to supporting business, building community, and promoting growth in the Greater Seminole area. We do this through various initiatives, much like the one we have today. As you all share in the feeling, this year has been one that we have not enjoyed and would like to get through quickly. However, the Chamber has and will end the year with resilient effort to support our local economy. We've done this through our Go Local, Go Big initiative, developed to encourage resources and encourage residents to purchase locally and buy in the Greater Seminole area. Keeping our spending local keeps our small businesses open and our job opportunities robust. Our small businesses provide lots of local flair for our economy. Also, we are hosting several businesses and community events such as our annual golf tournament, which is going to be held in October at the Seminole Lake Golf and Country Club. And then our Seminole Stampede 5K run, which we will do in conjunction with the City of Seminole's 50th anniversary celebration. As we move into 2021, we will continue to partner with other organizations to bring our community and businesses together for meaningful and robust events like the one we have today. We want to thank the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, and I appreciate Kimberly Jackson and her team for partnering with us, and we look forward to many other events together. Please feel free to share your comments or questions for Kimberly in the chat, and we will address them at the end of the program. Again, thank you for your attendance. I will now turn the event over to Dr. Mark Strickland, Provost of the St. Petersburg College campus, to introduce Ms. Jackson.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this afternoon's event. This has been an event in the making for quite some time in that we wanted to collaborate between the Seminole Chamber of Commerce and ISPS. Kim Jackson has been at the college for a few years now. She worked in another capacity before we had our eye on her to come and lead the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions. She's been an advocate for many different causes throughout her community. She serves on many committees throughout the St. Pete and the Pinellas area. She's actively involved in so many things, and it's amazing that she still has time to do programs like this one today, which essentially is an opportunity to talk about the political spectrum, both locally and nationally. We're proud of Kim and the work she is doing for the Institute in the college, and I'm happy and pleased that she was able to take time out of her day this afternoon to share with you some thoughts on the political landscape. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Kim Jackson.
So much for giving me the opportunity to just shine a light on the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions. Welcome and thank you, Seminole Chamber, for partnering with us. We are dedicated to reaching across Pinellas County to have meaningful dialogue and conversations in a civil manner. And so I'd like to really talk briefly about our mission before we begin, and that is that this program was a part of Congressman there's so many congressmen now, Congressman Bill Young's vision about what the Institute should look like. He envisioned a think tank where you had social, political, and discussions in a civil manner to talk about what the scope of government is and to make sure that our community understood what we can and cannot do as a community. I want to thank him for his tireless work. Over the past year, we have tried to align that mission, working with our current congressmen, Congressman Gus Bilirakis and Congressman Charlie Crist, doing a plethora of programs on nonprofit issues, on veteran issues, and on issues that relate to our community. As you can see on the slides right here, you'll see us working in the community, trying to elevate and enhance educational issues that mean so much to why our community is such a strong community. For more information, I'd really like you to visit our Facebook page. We're very proud of our Facebook page where we connect with many community organizations across the region and state and at the national level to promote programs and to enlighten the community. Before I begin the program today, I'd like to turn it over to our president, who has a brief opening about what the Institute is and the importance of it.
You know, civic engagement is so important, not only to St. Petersburg College, but to the benefit of our entire community. What we hope to do at St. Petersburg College, especially in the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, our goal is to be the catalyst for change. We want to be the convener, the individuals who pull everybody together to talk about a common cause and a plan, to build the mission and the strategy, to move forward and make this county, this state, and our world a better place to live, learn, and play.
Thank you. We're going to start with the presentation. So again, as a reminder, if you have any questions that you think of, please put them in the Q&A as they come to mind. I'm going to do my best to answer the questions. If I can't answer them, I'm just going to simply say I can't. And of course, I'll do more research and follow up with any of the participants. So today I was asked to talk about some key races. And before I begin, I'd really just like to talk about the climate of our current electoral process. It's important to stay informed, and regardless of what I say here today or what anyone else says, it's important to go to the candidates' websites, to research their statements, to watch their video presentations and their debates, and really learn what is best for you as a voter. In this current space where we have so much information coming at us at lightning speed, it's crucial to understand that voting is a privilege, and it's a privilege that is important because we educate ourselves on the issues that present us, that impact our lives and align with our ideology. So I'm going to start with the sheriff's race. And the sheriff's race is quite interesting because we have two candidates here, one who has vast experience but has had some criticism, but overall has a very strong record in the community, and a person who is relatively unknown to this particular space. I'm going to start off with Sheriff Gualtieri. Sheriff Gualtieri is known for law and order. He has a strong reputation for public service and character, and he believes in strong community policing and does not believe there is a significant bias in the sheriff's office, how it's conducted, who makes a part of the leadership, and how policing is done. He is conservative leaning. Many of you may know that he was tasked by the governor to investigate the Parkland shooting and has submitted 2 reports thus far, and that reporting goes out to 2023. The 2 reports given so far talk about preparing students, preparing teachers, an emphasis on training and drills, and strengthening policies and procedures that are going to be necessary, because he quite honestly admitted that, you know, we're preparing for next generations when this unfortunate incident could occur again. He's not opposed, according to his many debates so far in the literature I've read and researched, to protests. And so that's where there's been some controversy and how some view him. Some say that he is opposed to protests. He said, of course, that he's not, as long as they are peaceful protests and they're not violent protests. So to get on the opposite side of where the challenge is with the biases, some have criticized him recently for the demonstrations that have occurred primarily as a result of the recent deaths around the country. Some community organizers have indicated that demonstrators were disproportionately arrested for bond for nonviolent protests, and they don't like his positions as it relates to the Clearwater incident where a young person was killed in a parking lot. On the other hand, when you look at the data for the sheriff's office, Sheriff Gualtieri makes a good point about the demographics of the community. 79% of our county is white and 11% is African American. That's the reflection of Pinellas County. In his department, he has 78% white employees and 12.2% African American employees, which his position is that is a balance and reflective of the community. When you're doing soft polls, and I like to do these soft polls when I do research, I just sort of randomly ask people their questions about who do they know is running, what do they know about the candidates, how do they feel about the candidates, have they ever interacted with them on any level, and what are their gut feelings, what's the scene, what are they hearing? From what I've been told from some of my soft polls is that while there's balance in the employee in terms of racial demographics, in terms of leadership, it's more leaning towards white male over gender and racial equality. He has also acknowledged that there's issues with communication in the community, which is something he needs to strengthen, but has really strong programs as it relates to helping first-time offenders. For example, he has a juvenile civil citation or pre-arrest diversion program that prevents young people from going to jail. He has mental health programs. He has adult pre-arrest programs for first-time offenders, and according to his statistics, he's reduced crime in the area by 49%. So that speaks to that. One thing that is strong in his record is that there are not that many officers, at least from my research, that are also attorneys, also public managers, also working for the government for as long as he's had. And he leads over 3,080 sheriffs in the United States, or 3,080 to be exact. His competition, Eliseo Santana, does not have the same level of experience in this particular area, but has a strong platform as it relates to diversity issues. Most of the debates focused on his interest in creating balanced racial and economic equity and having more diverse programs where you infuse the sheriff's office with more balance as it comes to that, and asking about critical police stops and pushing data on how we as a community can better react to issues with regard to funding for police officers and how we do a better job of community policing. So that's really his focus. So from the record, that's where it stands on the sheriff's race. So I'd like to move on to the candidates for commissioners. And I have the school board up, so I can switch over to the school board. So we'll start with the school board. I thought on my slide I had the commissioners up. So for the school board, that's an interesting race. Of course, there were 4 people in the race. This particular district is District 7. So before we even get into the candidates, District 7 is interesting because although, of course, there's no fast rule, it's been long held by an African American in that area. For District 7, you have to live in District 7 to vote in there. It's a single member district. So unlike other areas where everyone can vote, you can't. So this district has, so in comparison, District 7, the single district has more than 10% Black voters. District 4 has 3 Black voters. District 6 has 4%, District 5 has 10%, and District 7 has 20% of African American voters, which of course, when you're talking about proportionality and representation, that's why that matters. And also for further statistics, Pinellas County schools are made up of a student population that is 51.1% white, 18.9% Black, and Hispanic is 4.6%. And I don't have the specific statistics for Asians. So in this area also, you've had since 2002, which is not so long ago, the 3 solid African Americans who have led in this particular district: Mary Brown, Lou Williams, and Renee Flowers, who of course has left to run for the county commissioner seat. So in this race, there were 4. There were 3 African Americans and 1 white American. And left from that race are Carl Nurse and Caprice Edmonds. So first I'll start with Carl Nurse. He was sponsored by the Tampa Bay Times. He's a former city council member. He's lived in the area where he's serving, and he has a strong reputation for collaborating and and having meaningful interactions within the community. Caprice Edmonds is relatively new. She is a teacher. She is backed by the Pinellas Classroom Teachers Associations, and I would advise you all both to go to their websites to see exactly who backed them, because in this dynamic election, you have that changing rapidly. So, she's raised for her race prior to the primaries, a little over $30,000. Carl Nurse raised a little over $50,000. All these statistics can be checked by the Tampa Bay Times. And for Carl Nurse, he spent a large portion of his funds, about $40,000, for the race. So then the issue becomes, you know, when we have this, they had a runoff, because at the primaries, Carl Nurse received 33.98% of the vote, and Caprice Edmond received 25.05% of the vote. So I think it will, moving forward, is going to be a challenge for the community to look up the records and make their own decisions. So when you look at from experience, they both have strong experience in community ties. They've both worked tirelessly trying to provide equitable resources to the community. When you look at their views, they're not so divergent. It really is a matter of, you know, going in and seeing who is the best for this seat. Interesting, there's not many school board elections that have the lens that we do in our community. We have a strong lens in the community because of the Tampa Bay Times Pulitzer Prize expose of failing factories, which sort of align with our poverty pockets in the community. So since that time, there's been a specific spotlight on Pinellas County schools and what we're doing to balance these test scores to provide more equity in a county that seems to be small enough to handle these challenges, but has not. So there's been an ongoing discussion about providing that level of equity in the school system. And so this particular race shines a stronger lens on that area. So now I hope my next slide talks about the commissioners, so I'll wait to see what I prepared. Wonderful. So now I want to move to the county commissioners. So I think for the one thing that's interesting about this race in general, whether you're talking about the sheriffs or the school board candidates or the county commissioners, you have some very strong personalities and some very strong views that align with what's going on at the state level and what's going on at the national level. So we have to be very mindful of this space where, you know, it's very easy to say, I agree with this person because of a specific party ideology, without going in deeper to see some of the policies that they hold and their record on particular issues. So I think it's important, although I'm giving an overview of the, you know, the landscape of elections, that it's important to really dig deeper into the views, especially when we have long-term politicians in our area. This race, for example, has two long-term politicians who are well-known in our area. When you talk about Janet Long recently has been focused on civil unrest. And may I remind you, although most of the audience probably know, this is District 1 and anyone can vote in this district. She talked about, in her last debate, she talked about public testimony about the mask mandate and emphasized how long it took and how challenging it was, and that the decision was made to keep the state of emergency in place and the mask mandate in place in order to retain federal dollars to support the community. But she actually wrote a letter about some of the social issues plaguing the time right at the beginning of some of the murders and some of the social unrest and some of the challenges between police officers and community, etc. She did a broad statement about social issues. She's also focused on transportation and infrastructure. She said it's her priority. She's really focused on $21.8 million that have come to the Pinellas government to begin construction on transportation connectivity from downtown to the St. Pete beaches, which she thinks will be transformational, and also will go to Tampa and Wesley Chapel. Finally, she talks about resiliency and having a lot of regional governments sign their commitment to reduce the carbon footprint, and more importantly, to understand and have issues related to resiliency. And she is also committed to affordable housing. $80 million has been dedicated to affordable housing, and she emphasized that that was for frontline workers who need the affordable housing at a time period where Pinellas County is changing rapidly and becoming geographically expensive for many people who live and have lived in the area for some time. She's also focused on the fact that she has not raised taxes, and again, with regards to her environmental concerns, she believes that we should be strongly committed because of coastal areas. And then conversely, we have Larry Ahern, who has been in the public light for a long time as well. He's a 40-year resident of our community, and he emphasizes his structure as a community person and as a family person. When you go to his website and you research him, he talks about the fact that he has strong conservative views on being a family person, on being a part of the military, the U.S. Air Force, a small business owner, a mentor, and of course, serving for the Florida House of Representatives for 4 two-year terms. He also talked about why he wanted to get back into this, which was to continue to serve. His contention, it seems to be, is the term limit that was supposed to be voted on, that from his position, Janet Long didn't take a stance on, and that there are no term limits, and he wants to enforce that. And finally, he also believes that transportation is important, but there has to be fiscally responsible ways to improve transportations and not just have drastic measures. And one other thing, he talks about supporting public safety as a strong mechanism for not having challenges in civil discourse in the community, but supporting a strong public safety platform. So now I think I'm going to move on to the last ones before we get to the national level. And the last area is, again, District 7, which is a seat that's traditionally been African-American. It's been held by Ken Welch for some time. And the candidates that remain are also very strong personalities. We have Renee Flowers and we have Maria Scruggs. And when you look at this from a community perspective, I think it will be most interesting because, again, most of the candidates have been in and around the community. People know Renee, people know Maria, people grew up with them. People have strong views on their level of advocacy and the pathways that they've taken to promote change, particularly in the area. And pound for pound, when you're looking at their viewpoints in some way are the same. It's just implementation of what they think, how it should be done, are different. So for example, when asked about platforms, Renee's platform is affordable housing, healthcare, and economic development, attracting new businesses for living wages. Whereas when you talk about Maria, her platforms are very similar, but more focused on unemployment. She's focused on the fact that we have to rebuild small and minority-owned businesses, and we have to have affordable housing issues because they are related to not having appropriate wages to be able to live and breathe in the community. So starting off with there, but going back to Renee, some of the key issues that were noticed were the equitable distribution of the community. So for those of you all who aren't aware about the 5 poverty pockets, what the county commission has talked about for some time, and I want to take the time to actually thank Charlie Justice because he educated me quite a while ago when I was chairing our political science department. But these pockets tend to have challenges that we know are systemic in the area, and that we have to take some time to figure out what is a strong footprint moving forward. So I don't think it's debatable for us to discuss that there are equitable distribution issues in the Lellman area and the Gulfport, Kenneth City area and the South St. Pete area. And both Renee and Maria strongly feel that there should be some support and sustainable programs to discuss how we move forward in strengthening those communities so that there's not this continued widening gap of equitable resources. Renee focuses on expanding the CRA, which was a program that Ken Welch supported to support businesses and get them going again in the community. And she feels like we should build upon small business development. Whereas for Maria believes that we have to have a strong economic focus to handle that. Some of the questions also spill over when you're talking about economic inequity and distribution, spill over into food insecurity, which is a big issue in the area. So when I always say, when you're talking to people about what matters to you at the local level, is your trash being picked up? Do you have a good quality grocery store? Do you have good community policing? Do you have strong ability to connect with your local politician to tell them when you're having problems to have them be resolved? So in the particular area that's been the focus is what was formerly the Sweet Bay Plaza. And when you're going into an area where they're called food deserts or food insecurity, there are just challenges getting quality food. So then you add COVID on top of that, and that compromises and creates a more equitable challenge when people who already have issues have challenges getting more access to quality and healthy food, particularly in a time of a pandemic. So Renee's focus was on working with organizations who are already distributing food, but of course expanding the footprints of a real grocery store, corner stores, and emphasizing that we can teach our community members how to grow their own fresh produce as well. There are many sustainable growth programs in South St. Pete right now that are doing quite well, thanks to community efforts from leaders in the area. And for the food insecurity, from Maria's standpoint, she talked about being strategic about the individuals, not just about there not being food, but rather her focus was on grocery stores that actually provide the healthy food options and economic opportunities that are going to allow people to buy food that is more of a better quality. And again, for her, that transitions to having minimum wages. And finally, they talked about their record. I think when you talk about records, again, you have two community icons who have done their work uplifting the community, and to go into their records, they both have significant service, whether it's with law enforcement and early childhood education, or with the school board or the city council, or being the vice chair of the census committee as Renee was, or they're both focused on equity. Again, it's more about implementation of how you address the issues in District 7 that have been ongoing, and how you specifically address poverty pockets to prevent the widening of gap. And by the way, they're both for renewable energy programs and sustainability programs. They both share that. And then I think I have one more slide. Okay, so I have no idea what questions I'm going to get about this. My esteemed leader, Mark, asked me to add this to the slide in light of the many, many challenges that are going on. And of course, we'll have a slide presentation talking about the debates. This election has been, is shed light on how we talk to each other and our ideologies and our perspectives. I think it's very clear when you look at each individual's respective platform what they stand for. So then we will see from the public what matters to them in terms of what the qualities they want in a leader. As a political scientist, I believe in the republic. The republic is how we are formed, and we're formed by input. I often talk about the amendments that allowed for suffrage, and I would be remiss of not acknowledging that we just made 100 years as women in voting from the 19th Amendment. So voting is important for a lot of reasons. So you get your ideology, of course, from several different buckets. You get them from your family, you get them from your friends, you get them from what I call an event in your life that was transformational, like maybe a friend being assaulted, or being placed in a position where you wouldn't ordinarily be. You get them from your religious beliefs, or if you don't have them. You get them from your economic beliefs, or if you have challenges, and you also get them, of course, from your educational space. And so that all lends into a bucket. So then with a focus here for Pinellas tying that to the national economy, we also have to recognize that many of us live in silos where we communicate with the same people over and over again. We work and play with the same people over and over again, and it's hard to expand our bucket of pools, and that spills over into how we connect on a digital platform, et cetera. So for the election, I will say this. I think that the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg has changed the landscape of the conversation and is going to continue to motivate voters at this last final run that maybe wouldn't have ordinarily come out, but because they're so committed to justices, that will change it. I also think that the recent, just yesterday, announcement of the charges that will be filed in the Breonna Taylor case and what will evolve from over the next couple of weeks from that will be transformational. I also think that every community is going to have a challenge discussing how we interact with voting and getting that vote out and understanding the importance of how it's implemented. So with that, I will take any and all questions, and I think I'm actually running on time.
You are. We don't have any questions yet. But
Okay.
I jotted down a few after listening to your comments, and one would be, you talked early in the program about your soft polls, and that you do that frequently. We don't know who your pollsters are, I guess, and so with that, are you finding that they are educating themselves?
Not always. So that's a good question. So because I'm asked to moderate a lot of debates, I'll just use the school board, for example, because, you know, as a parent myself, I'm a parent of a child with special needs. She has Asperger's syndrome. COVID has been challenging on everyone, on teachers, on administrators, on parents, on friend circles, on the private system versus the public school system. And so when I ask questions, I literally ask the stakeholders. I ask parents of kids with different races or blended families, if you will, or working parents versus families who don't work, or families who don't have equity versus families who have a lot of money and their situation is different, and the teachers and the administrators. And I try to get this, you know, group of what people are feeling, because I find that when you ask people to do that digitally sometimes, you know, they're not always as candid, or they're, you know, can in some cases be dismissive because we're in digital overload. But second, it's hard for people to not feel judged about their statement. And then of course, when I do my research, I also look at, you know, the actual legal primary resources. So we just had a huge trial. I don't know if any of the members of the chamber were able to watch it, but it's probably still digitized, I'm sure. It's very interesting to see the testimony on both sides of perspectives of how we move forward as a state as it relates to schools. So if you can move the mic a little bit closer to you. So for our audience, we have this wonderful tech team that has these little hints that we get. So if I say them out loud, that's why. So, you know, when you're looking from the raw testimony of people and you're researching the decisions that are made as a result of it, and then you're talking to people and just engaging in what I call old school neighborhood chat, then you get more real responses than engaging with debates. When you just ask them what's going on in your life and how do you feel and why do you care or why don't you care? And so some of the issues that, so that's how my soft polling goes. And I like to say I have friends in a lot of circles.
Well, that's good for us. So I'll lead that question. I still don't have any from the audience, but so for those who are not educating themselves well enough to make those decisions when they go to the polls, we all know the rhetoric about mainstream media. Where would you recommend people find their information in detail?
Well, first I would say we have the beauty of having all of these debates. So, and that's at all levels. And in Pinellas County, we're fortunate to be very connected. We have a very, to me, active electorate, more than I've seen in most communities, who come out for city council meetings, for school board meetings, for commissioner meetings, for anything that's open and speak and implement change. Most of that is digitized, and it's easy to see the issues, particularly if you're a learner and you're busy and you want to learn more about that. So there's been, I'm going to guess, no less than 5 or 6 debates between the different forums, between the League of Women Voters, between the Institute for Strategic Policy Solution, between nonprofit organizations like the Art Alliance and the Carter G. Wood Davidson Center and Chambers, the Tiger Bay.
Yeah.
There's been so many different debates where you can see from the inception where I think there have been very quality questions that have been asked of the candidates. And unlike in a space where they might be challenged by the audience and they're in their own particular Zoom box, they have to answer the questions with complete candor. And I think that really helps out a lot, getting a lens on what they stand for in their policies. But then also because of the different methods of social media, you can always look up people too to see, you know, if what they're saying matches what they're actually doing. And for our longtime leaders, you can look at their record, right? You can go in and look at their record. And by that, you can go to see what were the school board decisions made during tenures? What were the city council decisions made during tenures? If you have people who are new to the, you know, to Canada, they're running for the first time, you can see what have the people who endorse them or not endorse them said about them as to why. Of course, we have the resources of the Tampa Bay Times. And what I like now is that most of, at least written articles, are embedded links with where they're getting their resources from. And yes, it's time consuming, right? But, you know, going to vote and checking a name because you've heard that name over and over again, which creates voter apathy. So we encourage and tell people it's your right to vote. People have died for this right. People have fought for this right. It's a right that's constantly being, you know, challenged by different perspectives on how it's delivered. And so when you take the time to go to vote, you know, it is important to understand.
Look at your ballot. See
On the
who's
ballot.
there.
And also, I should say, we have a great supervisor of elections website. The website is actually incredible. You can go to the candidate section, you can click on every candidate, and it'll say almost anything you can think of about them, their record, even the percentages. And there's a certain section of the website, and I'm sorry I don't have it memorized, where you can go and look at every prior election and do the breakdown of the percentages of who voted and where that vote came from. For example, by gender, by race, by area in the county, to see who's voting and by if they've identified as a party. So that's important too when you're talking about data and trends of, you know, what issues are important to people, what is mobilizing them. And when you're talking about these issues, you know, I always say in this climate that can be quite heated where you spend more time arguing about your perspective, and this is just an overall view, my own family members and extended friends and people I'm in circles with, instead of spending that time about what, you know, your position, expand your time, because it's not just about one race, it's about several races. So we didn't talk about, of course, the judicial local races here, or there are just many other races down ballot that we have to discuss other than the ones that get the most light. To hear about these candidates. And that's important when you're talking about your record.
You're absolutely right. I know
Hey, Kim, can you hear me?
many of us are guilty of knowing they want that person from that race and then don't probably know anything about the rest of the folks on the ballot, or not
Right.
all of them. So it's good.
And it's
good
also
great
important if
point.
you do back a candidate to, even if you back a candidate because of the totality of their thoughts, and there's something you disagree with that candidate on, that you might actually, when they're elected, at least you know where your differences lie, so you can
Right.
still continue to push that lens of, okay, I voted for you for this reason. You can't align with someone on every issue that you're voting on. When you're voting someone, you're trusting them to represent the overall ideology, and you're trusting their judgment to make decisions that you hope will improve the quality of your life on some level, regardless of the race. And so it's, you know, I would say statistically almost impossible for you to agree with everything that that candidate says. But when you're informed, you can also, you know, advocate and say, this is why I voted for you. And these are some of the concerns I have about the challenges that came forward on your platform.
Okay. I have, sorry. Does that wrap that one up? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yes, absolutely.
It pops up, so you're surprised.
Oh, so yes.
So we do have another one. Do you know why the current Pinellas County Supervisor of Elections has declined to participate in a candidate forum?
I can't answer that question, so I'm sorry I did not research that. I can certainly, as the chamber collects questions that we couldn't address, I will find out.
Most certainly.
I don't think that there is there's a challenger for supervisor of elections, so, but I would like to have time to research to say why.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, Mark Strickland has one. Can you expand on social media and expanding your insight?
Yes. Okay. So I don't really watch television often, and I shouldn't even use that term because my husband and my child would say that's such an antiquated term. But they forced me to watch. It's called now I'm going to forget the name of it, but it's the Social Network or something that talks about the digital footprint by the people who invented, technology. So when I get that, it's a very interesting program on Netflix right now that talks about who invented social media and how they have programmed to train you to check in to your social media and to feed your particular vices. And I'm going to think of the name of it as I'm talking. But if someone from the participants knows, please let me know. But it's quite fascinating because it legitimizes what I'm always talking to people about. So when you're on Facebook or you're on Twitter, for example, of course, there's many platforms, you are generally speaking to an audience of yourself, right? Because you are likely developed a platform over time where you have the same types of friends who have the same or similar ideology, who share very similar views on issues. And so the feed and the information that you're getting from these digital platforms and the people you're likely to interface and interact with are often the same, which reinforces your views and doesn't allow you to move into a new space of learning other ideas. It also sort of baits you in a way to be more entrenched in your views because you're not engaging with other people and having true civic discourse or disagreements and discussion. And so having these silos within the different platforms and having advertisements that are now on top of it enforced and tailored to your preferences, depending on what you're clicking on, what you're liking, what you search for, it sort of stops the user, if you will, from expanding your views and looking elsewhere. And then that entrenches your thought process about what you believe without going further, without reading an article in its totality, without hearing an entire speech about what someone has said, without digging deeper to see if you're fact checking or you're allowing someone else to fact check for you. So I think the digital divide creates somewhat of a challenge when we're not just talking about entertaining factors, but we're talking about information that we have to rely on to make important decisions. And so from that perspective, I think it's very important for sometimes just to put this down, the computer down, the phone down.
Our children.
And that's also why I do the soft polls, right? I do the soft polls for that very reason, to talk to human beings, to say, if I have someone who has, a sign on their yard and they're willing to talk to me and just tell me how they feel and why, that person doesn't necessarily feel attacked because they've selected a candidate which someone may not agree with. They're saying the why they are. And then you get true measures of data and polling too when you do that versus what's being pushed at you. So I am a firm believer in this digital divide causes so many challenges based on your interests. You're creating an audience of one, and that's the audience of yourself to reinforce what you're interested in. And so I wish I could think of the name of it. Which
I've got it.
Did you find?
It's called The Social Dilemma.
Yes, The Social Dilemma. I was arguing with my husband and he said, I think you're right. We need to watch this. You need to watch this with me. I watched it already. And he's like, I think you're right. They programmed us. So,
And they continue to do
yeah.
so,
And
right?
so we think about, how often people go outside of that. And that's important because that's where most of us are getting our information from. So.
Wonderful. The Social Dilemma. I'm going to watch it too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple of others. So a couple that are one and the same, I think, and I'll read them both. Do you think that two-party system is working in today's America? And then to expand on that, to follow up on that previous conversation, many people vote by party and not really consider the issues. From your understanding, how does a two-party system or a party system positively or negatively impact democracy? It's funny, I had kind of the same question jotted down about, do you see a party ticket in the future, or is it all going to be independent? How do you answer?
So I'll start with the second question first. I do think it's created quite a divide where we are moving to a place where people are so entrenched in their party and some of the specific buckets or tenets of that party and not the entirety of it. And it makes it hard. Like, so, you know, when I first started in this area, I always talked about a rainbow where, you know, we have moderates in the center and undecided voters, and then of course those who lean left or lean right. But oftentimes there was this bounce back and forth of where you have issues. And you find now that both parties are becoming more strongly entrenched in some of their stronger positions. And that creates, again, apathy for voters who are not that tuned in or don't get tuned in until later or don't have the same pressing needs or concerns, rightly or wrongly. America looks very different for many different people. Geographically, depending on where you live is your exposure level. Mm-hmm. If you live in a very rural versus urban area, you have a whole different thought process and you may not have that connectivity. So this party entrenchment compromises the system of a popular vote system and an electoral system, and it creates sort of like a sports board of how do I, you know, navigate the country instead of representing, as I said, the entire republic. One of those slides I had at the last was, you know, that you can have a republic if you can keep it, and you have to fight for that dynamic. Mm-hmm. So the two-party system, of course, evolved from the perspective of the Federalists and those who were against the Federalist Papers. And it was important because it really talked about a centralized government versus a state-focused government, and, you know, how we intertwine. Of course, we're citizens of our state and our respective cities and counties, and we're citizens of the United States. And so that two-party system has always had that pull and push. Do I think this next generation of young people desire and want a third-party system? Absolutely. Do I think we're going to get to there in the near future? I don't know, because the structure of our system and the economic engine that supports both structures, including what we don't even talk about, lobbyists, entrenches the support for a strong two-party system. And any time history has dictated when we add a third-party candidate or a non-mainstream candidate, they usually just siphon off votes from one of the strong party leaders. And so do you see change on the horizon? Absolutely. I think that there's a younger generation of change on the horizon who demands a third-party system, but then how does that expand to more parties who want to come forward? Because now you have, before the parties held the bucket of ideology from very strong views to less strong held views, and now, because they're not necessarily doing that all the time, you have these emerging groups who want differing views and they don't necessarily agree. So I hope I answered that question succinctly in that, yes, I do believe the structure of our current system is entrenched too strongly and has caused a climate where we can't have conversations. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love the Institute, because we're a forum and convener to have these conversations without feeling criticized for your thought process, and to really talk about not just when you vote, but what we do afterwards with budget and appropriation, with discussions about implementation, with discussions about how the money is funneled from the national and the state to our local days to make our everyday lives. Because most people in their real lives, if they would talk about it, would talk about what's going on in their day-to-day life, right, not what's going on outside their life. I didn't know if there was another question, because I know we're getting towards our wrap up.
Not per se.
Mm-hmm.
I think you addressed, we had this question somewhat before. Can you just bullet bullet point again, recommended information sources.
So absolutely. So, you know, and I should also say, if you're interested in a topic, right? Sometimes it's nice just to watch history stuff. I know that, again, it's not the most attractive statement to say, but like a lot of people will ask me about African-American issues. They don't really understand the dynamics of, you know, the Civil War and how that relates to Reconstruction and how that relates to how our government was formed and how that relates to how our Senate was formed, to how our House of Representatives were formed, proportionality. Well, you know, Henry Louis Gates, who is a national historian, I think it's PBS, has a 4-part series on Reconstruction, which is very educational and informative and not biased. It's factual. And they're 1-hour snippets for you to watch. Again, boring to some people. C-SPAN is where you actually see debate. So you don't have to worry about what the media or any other outlet reported that a congressperson or leader said. You actually will watch the real-time debates and see for yourself, you know, how, you know, what people think about that. So in terms of topics, and it's always, and also C-SPAN has, you know, documentaries. Like I'm sure if you went on now, you could learn a ton about the history of our particular leaders, particularly the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's actual website is quite transformational, and I can provide you the actual links, but if you do official Supreme Court website. So if you wanted to listen to a case, for example, let's just take Brown versus Board of Education, they've digitized everything. So you can actually hear the lawyers' arguments from the time period and how the justices came down. And so you don't have to be overwhelmed by this big ruling that says, I don't even know how to read this. Everyone's not lawyers and I don't know how to even read this. You can just listen to the arguments, which strangely, with most of the cases, sound pretty much the same about what we struggle as Americans now on some of the same issues. So, you know, to expand your resources, not for every day, but when you're trying to expand your knowledge on issues, it's important to take that dive from a historical perspective. In terms of real sources, I always go to the person's platform. If they said they have a website, I want to read what they said that they're going to do for the community. If they are a former leader, I like to look up, you know, their debates. Like you can go on, you know, I go to Online Sunshine, which is our how we hold everything for our state legislature. And then you can literally go through everything, hearings, you know, recently did some work for criminal justice reform, and I listened to every last hearing from Senator Brandis and Roussan, so I could hear who appeared before them and what they had to say and what the movement was and what was trying to be implemented during that time period. So when I say primary resources, I really mean primary resources, not any of the doing research. Like, well, and it's not for everything. It's for the candidates you care about, right? So, you know, you can look at a candidate and have heard their name 10,000 times. And if you want to dig deeper, then that's when it matters. You know, for me, it often matters when friends and colleagues ask me about who's on our local bench, you know, because it's hard to find information as an average person. So looking up their cases and what they've done in the community is an important way to get to know who's making those decisions. So I think I have some important dates, but I did not bring my glasses, which is a common problem I have. So I hope that the participants can see the important dates. One of them I have memorized is, of course, you have to register to vote by October 5th. If you don't register to vote before October 5th, you cannot. For early voting, I would recommend early voting, right? Early voting is just that. You get your ballot and you go and you drop it off during the time period that's permitted for early voting. There will be a lot of drop-off sites around the community. And of course, you can go to the supervisor of elections to get more information. One thing that I like that both parties are saying is have a plan, right? Have a plan. And we talked about, and briefly, because I'm looking at the time as we're wrapping up, why does that matter? Well, we all have jobs. Oh, there's one more question.
Yeah,
you want me to stop?
No,
okay.
Go ahead.
We all have jobs, right? So some people can't take time off. So they might get to the poll too late. or they might get in line too late, or they may not have the resources to take off,
Right.
take the average person who's working at both, a daytime job and an afternoon job to make ends meet and have childcare issues, or a person who has disability issues, or a person who has, just challenges in general with transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Or who has not done the research to say, where's my polling station? Is my signature accurate on all of my forms? Am I going to the right place? Do I have the time periods? It is a plan to get to voting. So I think that's important to understand that. But if you do decide to get a mail-in ballot on the day of the election, you have to drop it off before 7 p.m. I'm pretty sure that's what my slide says over there, but I can't see that far. We passed National Voters Registration Day. That was, the days are running by me today, but that was the 22nd, I believe.
Yes, and they will be up on the screen again in a few moments, and they were already once. So final question we'll take, but I will say that we will take additional questions so we can forward to you
Sure,
if
absolutely.
someone comes up with something they would like to have answered. So final question, as we seek better Black and Brown participation in senior law enforcement, we have seen a great deal of unrest in minority-led police departments and the resignation of several top law enforcement leaders or chiefs. How might we understand the cause and impact of this?
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
So I like my last slide that I hope you are saying. Invictus is one of my favorite poems about being the master of your fate and the captain of your soul. We have to integrate as a community more to understand the climate in which we work. And so speaking as, I always say this, I say this a lot, no group is monolithic. As an African-American female today, I'm sitting here as Kimberly Griffey Jackson and not speaking for all the other African-American females in our county or et cetera. But as a minority, when you're recruiting people, it's not just recruiting people, it's making them feel welcome and comforted when they get to the space where they are, oftentimes where they feel sometimes like a double minority because there's not so many people to balance. And it doesn't have to be a stressful conversation. We're talking about numbers. The sheriff himself and his common knowledge that, for example, our county is 11% Black and predominant other. And so in most spaces, you're going to have areas where there's not the level of integration that would be required to get to know a person and understand their challenges. So recruitment and how you infuse implementation in that recruitment becomes important. And I had this conversation, I'll flip over out of the law enforcement and go into legal, which is more of my wheelhouse, to try to make an analogy. When we did the criminal justice reform program with Benjamin Crump, which you all can see that on our website, everyone didn't agree that they even wanted him. Let's start there, right? But Stetson University College of Law came out. The Clearwater Bar Association came out. The St. Petersburg Bar Association came out. The Fred G. Menace Bar Association came out. The newly formed Latin American Bar Association came out. The Pinellas Criminal, and I'm sorry if I'm saying your names wrong, guys, I always mess that up. The Criminal Bar Association, essentially. They all came together to discuss the issues of how can we do this better? So it's the same thing, I think, with any profession, right? At some point, you have to sit in a room and hash out the issues and say, this is not working. And instead of us debating about this is not working, this is not working, this is not working, coming up with a systemic plan to say, how can we change it? I think that we could do a better job of recruiting people at a younger age and making sure that they have the resources to pass the exams, to make sure that they can get into departments. I think we can do, I know our officers are doing a fabulous job mentoring, but I always say this is kind of cheesy. When I was young in Crete, Illinois, we had Officer Friendly. It was actually a policy platform where this Officer Friendly came and connected with us so that people from a very young age interacted with officers. That's important, how we measure that. And having issues where if a problem occurs, that we don't sweep it under, but rather we talk about this happened and this is how we're working to change, and allowing community input to do that. because not one person can stand alone on their own island. And then when there is significant pressure, there's also pressure from respective communities. And when you see resignations, again, generally, this is just me opining without talking to anyone. When you see resignations, it's generally because, you're isolated trying to solve a systemic or community or structural problem or challenge, and that's hard to do. That's just not reality for any one person, and remove one person, put in the next. It's just not a reasonable path. So I hope I answered that question. I always say, you also get to know someone that's not like you. You go to these dinners and you sit at the table with the same people, and you're scared to sit at a table who looks different than you, or, make the effort to get to meet someone else in a different space. And then that allows you to ask more uncomfortable questions about it. So I think we've moved on because of our Zoom platform. Oh, are we good? Okay, so I think I got my signal to wrap up. So I'd like to say, as we wrap up, if it's okay, I would invite everyone to go to our new website, isps@spcollege.edu. Again, isps@spcollege.edu. Our tech team has created this new wonderful platform that is aesthetic on all devices. And you can see our former programs, our upcoming programs, our programs under events. You can get to know a little bit about our board of directors if you all don't mind going to that particular side. We have a very strong board of directors that supports the Institute. I'm very proud to work with them. And you can see a little bit about, some of the community work we do. I want to thank, of course, the Seminole Chamber and, of course, my esteemed leader, Mark, for inviting me to be on this platform. And I'd like to end with one of our new board members. His name is Jeff Johnson, and he is the statewide director of AARP, and he's just going to talk a little bit about civic engagement. Thank you again for your time, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this platform today.
Thank you, Kimberly. We enjoyed having you, and we'll have you back.
Thank you.
AARP is an organization that was really founded by volunteers for civic engagement. And while the issue sets of the different participants in this group may vary, the reality is that we all rely on having a strong civic culture in order to be able to make our communities and our state even better than it is today. It was disturbing to us to find out that Florida actually ranks really low when it comes to virtually every measure of civic engagement. And we feel that being part of a broad coalition that's here to try to improve those numbers is our best way to contribute to a better Florida. It's important to use opportunities to get together for a couple of reasons. One, to highlight the good work that's already been out there and sort of plant seeds with other participants about where they could take ideas from another part of the state or another audience and try to tweak it to make it fit their particular situation. I think at the same time, it's really helpful for people who are really focused on how we engage citizens and residents of the state in the civic culture to get a chance to be together and support one another. In a lot of ways, this is a chance for the people who are most passionate about it to get together and feed off each other's energy so we can go back out to our communities and our audiences and really deliver the message that this is a critical part of what it means to be a Floridian.